Hello there, and welcome to another episode of Talking TRM, the podcast dedicated to travel risk management. My name is Bex Deadman, also known as Travel Risk Bex. And today, and I love this bit, I love doing my introductions to my guests because you all blush. So this is a gentleman who I've actually met only quite recently, and we've kind of connected on LinkedIn. Due to a couple of posts that I put out there recently, which I just decided I push the bar a little bit and start talking about, what really happens on business trips, and courtesy of a BA pilot getting up to all sorts of things, and a few other stories that I'd heard. I had some good fodder for some articles. And Stacey got in touch and made some comments, and we then had a conversation from that. And from that conversation, once again, I meet another person in this space who's just doing stuff quietly, just getting on with it, not making a lot of noise. And I was like, no, 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 no. We need to get this experience out there, recorded and out there for public domain. So without further ado, a new friend you may be, but a friend you are all the same. Could I ask that you introduce yourself, please, to our listeners?
Yes, thank you so much for having me on your show. I just want to say good morning or good afternoon, wherever you are. My name is Stacey Porter, and I'm here in Atlanta, Georgia. I'm originally from Washington, D.C. I was born and raised there. And you're probably wondering, how did I end up in Atlanta, Georgia? Well, I spent 23 years with the federal government. I started my career with the Secret Service, and I worked for two former presidents, former President Clinton and also former President Bush. And then I transitioned over to Department of Homeland Security when he created that after 9/11, former President Bush. And what happened, I was actually working at the White House during 9/11. We were preparing for a congressional picnic that day. And as you all know, former President Bush was down in Florida at a school reading to a group of kids. Fast forward, 9/11 occurred, and it was just chaotic, chaos everywhere inside the White House, outside the White House, all throughout the United States and the country, as you can imagine. So fast forward, he created Department of Homeland Security, and I thought to myself, along with many other law enforcement personnel, what can I do to ensure we never have another attack on our homeland? So I transitioned over to the Federal Air Marshal Services, and that's when I started doing risk assessments on our nation's airports. I have traveled extensively throughout the country or throughout the world as well. London, quite a bit. It's probably one of my second homes. But it was pretty interesting doing these risk assessments because I had a chance to see behind the scenes of airports and, just look at all or find all the vulnerabilities that are associated with the airports and how do we mitigate those vulnerabilities because you have the public traveling every day nonstop, and what do we do to ensure the safety of the public? So that's where I came in, and I would take photos, taking notes as I'm looking, for vulnerabilities at our airports. Then I would write up a detailed report, and I would present that to my client. So that's pretty much how I got involved in doing risk assessments. And then after wearing that hat for a while, I decided it's time for me to look at getting a promotion. And that's how I ended up here in Atlanta. I got promoted to a supervisor position, wore that hat for a while, and, had many assignments as a supervisor as well. And in 2017, December 31st, I decided to call it quits. I retired from the federal government and I started my own company, which is Porter Global Security. And I took all this knowledge and skill that the government trained me, and I brought it over to my company. And I continue to do risk assessments as a security consultant now. So that's what I do. And once again, thank you for having me.
I hope all of my listeners have gone, okay, yeah, I get why she's got him on. Totally. Presidents, federal government, la la la, off we go. Absolutely. My goodness, what a resume. So there's so much I want to get into. um, so let's just start unpicking this. I think as we're talking obviously about travel risk, and obviously we always think about airports. And obviously 9/11 was a huge stake in the ground, awful thing to say, but a moment in time that I think changed obviously a lot of lives, but also changed a lot of how we do things, right? And how we look at stuff in this space, because it just hadn't really been kind of conceived of before that was kind of really something that well, actually, maybe you know more. Had it been conceived of before, or had risk assessments been done prior to this? I'm guessing no, because we hadn't even set up Homeland Security by that point.
Correct. And if you look back at 9/11, you can see or you saw how they got on the aircraft, how they went through security. At one time, I'm not sure how it was or how it is over there. At one time in the United States, if you had a loved one or someone traveling, good friend traveling somewhere, you can actually go with them to the gate and see them off on the aircraft. But you can't do that now, which we all know. You have to go through extensive security. And, if you're not traveling, you don't pass through security. So, a lot has changed after 9/11, of course. And that's why things continue to change. I'm sure, like over in London, just like here, there's continuous construction going on at our airports, adding new terminals, upgrading terminals, adding new security features. And hopefully that's where I come into play when I come in and do these risk assessments on our airports. They're listening and they're implementing these new features, if you will.
Agreed. And I think it's just the reason I kind of am so interested in this side specifically about the airports. There's a whole lot more I'm interested in, but just again from a travel risk perspective, is because often when we're writing policies and we're talking about things, we don't think about the actual destinations themselves in our minds as the kind of layman, as the as the sort of general public, if you will. We just assume that airports are pretty secure. You just do. And of course, they are now arguably a lot more than they were then because of that. But they're also extremely busy areas. And, things have happened at airports around the world subsequently from that. So, and it's not to say that every airport has the same standard of security or anything like that. But I think sometimes in our brains, because of what we go through, because of the processes, because of this, we sort of maybe think that it is. And I'm just curious to know if we then sort of expand that to other areas. Think about train stations. In Central Station in New York, Waterloo or King's Cross in London, and the Eurostar going out of that. There is just nowhere near the same level of scrutiny or security. And I just wondered, has there been from obviously I know you specialise in the airport side, but has there been interest from other kind of big hubs and areas as well? Because that for me feels like a huge risk. We
No,
talk
no, you're
about
absolutely right.
transport, but we
Yeah.
don't talk about the hubs.
Yeah, transportation is key, and they're very vulnerable. And again, just talking about our airports, and it's pretty much a public facility.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that, you can get in your vehicle, I can get my vehicle right now, drive up to the airport, park my vehicle along the terminal frontage, and I can get out my vehicle, walk inside the airport to the baggage claim, if you will, grab a bag, walk out the airport, jump in my car, and go. Now, a lot of your airports, because there have been thieves going and doing things like that. And one of the things that airports will do, especially during your peak hours when it's very crowded, you'll have security personnel kind of roaming around, or you'll have police officers roaming around in that area. And sometimes they may challenge you, meaning that, once you grab your bag, they may ask you questions just to see who you are and kind of match that ticket that you have with the bag. Okay, this person is who they say they are, and they can grab that bag. But a lot of your airports, they're also tied to transportation, meaning like your subway systems. Here in Atlanta, the subway goes right to the airport, which is great. It's convenient because I don't have to drive a vehicle or park my vehicle at the airport. I can just jump on a train and go to the airport if I have a trip. And when I'm back from my trip, jump on a train and come home. So your airports are dealing with a lot from homelessness because once the weather changes, what do you think? Hey, I'm homeless. It's cold out. I can go over to the airport where it's nice and warm. There's water, there's bathroom facilities, and I can utilize all that. So there's always that back and forth fight with our airports. How do we keep our public safe? As you mentioned with your train stations and bus stations, same thing. You don't have security where you can walk through before you enter on a train or where you enter on a bus. So that's the big fight right there. Now, I know over here, and I'm sure over there as well, you have law enforcement personnel that will patrol and roam the train stations as well as the bus stations just to make sure there is no nefarious activities going on at these locations. Now, again, we have a huge homeless population throughout the United States. And every now and then you may have some issues with that. The biggest thing over here right now is our youth. There's so much going on with the youth, social media from TikTok to Instagram, and they're posting things on TikTok and Instagram. Hey, let's go over to the train station. Let's go over to the airport, and we're going to start a big fight, if you will, just so they can get views on TikTok or Instagram. So that's something we have to contend with as well. And it's always this back and forth. And we always had this thing in law enforcement, no matter how much we try, train, which we do, but it always seems that the more we train, the bad guy is also training as well, possibly a step ahead of us. So we have to make sure we're not a step ahead of the bad guy, that we're two, three, or four, five steps ahead of the bad guy.
That's crazy. I hadn't even thought that. I don't think that's happening here, but I'm sure it's happening in other areas. I don't think it's happening at airports and stuff. We are definitely having issues with activists and things like that. And I sit kind of on the fence with this because I totally understand why people are feeling so passionate about our planet and all these things. So I do get it. But actually, the reaction is they're disrupting everyday lives and they are doing stuff at airports, and there's issues as far as that is concerned with security. So we're kind of dealing with that more um, than kind of just the attention thing. But wow, it just I agree though. We do have to be steps ahead. And this is the whole point of risk management, is it not? To be proactive, to not just kind of go, oh well, yeah, all this stuff's happened, but like it's never going to happen again. And it's like, well, of course it's not. Of course it's going to happen again. And it's going to happen differently and it's going to keep happening because that's what we're
Yes,
humans and this is what we do and we've been doing it forever. So we have to just keep
I agree.
wrapping ourselves around it,
Mhm.
don't we? So
Yes,
look, thank
yes,
you. I want to dive into more, but let's take you. Obviously, this is less about me and much more about you. So I want to, of all of these incredible things that you've done, from sort of joining, the federal government side, and obviously looking after the presidents, and all of this amazing experience you've got. Got so many questions about that. Try and just get in loads of stuff about that if you can. But what is your why in all of this? Because when I speak to my guests, I'm like, you're also driven. And again, as I said at the beginning, you're kind of just very quietly doing this in the background. And I know that's part of it. I get that. It's not about being exposed and everything, but it can be quite thankless, especially when it comes to corporate. I think it's slightly different if you're on president detail than you are just trying to explain to a business why they need to keep their travelers safe. It's a completely different scale, so it can just feel a little bit thankless sometimes. So what is it that got you out of bed every day? What was it that drove you to get to this incredible career that you've had and you continue to have?
yes. Great question. One of the things I tell people all the time when it comes to security, we don't have an opportunity to get it wrong. We have to get it right every single time. And with that said, my why is, I'm passionate about what I do, of course. I've done it for so many years. But, again, I'm always learning. I want to continue to learn because there's always change going on. And if I, become stagnant, then I'm not growing, I'm not learning. And I try to surround myself with like minded individuals. So I always tell myself, if I'm the smartest one in the room, then something's wrong. I need to step away and rethink what I'm doing. But, we live in a world that unfortunately a lot of things are going on. I know the big thing is mental health. We've seen right after COVID so much going on, and I think what we did or what happened when we were all locked up in our houses. I hate to say it that way, for the past 2 years, we didn't rethink how to open up our businesses and schools. We opened them up and just said, okay, everybody, come on back in, not thinking what was going on inside the household. So now we're seeing all these things going on out in the world, and we don't have an answer for all these things. So we're such a reactionary country here in the United States, meaning I remember when I started my business, someone said to me, "Oh, okay, you work in sales." I said, "No, I work in security. I'm a security consultant, and I don't do sales." And then I thought about that. I said, "Wait a minute, I have to sell my business. How do I sell consulting and to get myself in front of a crowd and let them know the importance of security?" And it's a battle sometimes, but I continue to knock on doors because out of all the doors that I knock on, somebody's going to eventually open up that door and say, "We need you." But what I try to do is prepare. Preparation is key because we don't want to have me come in after something has happened. We want to jump on it before it happens. So a lot of times security is never invited to the table until something happens. And that's what we have to change. So I'm continuously knocking on those doors. I'm networking and meeting people like yourself and just trying to get my message out there. So that's why I do what I do because I think the message needs to be heard. It needs to be heard loud and clear. And we have to continue working hard. We're going to get a lot of no's, but eventually we're going to get that yes, and we're going to be able to show our worth. So, again, if it's something that I can't do as a consultant, I know a lot of other people that can. There's a lot of work and information out here for all of us. And, again, networking is key to me. I'm very active on LinkedIn. And if I can't do it, I know someone that possibly can do it. So, I'll turn it over to them and I'll step away. And, that's how we try to work with each other. Someone may reach out to me and say, "Hey, Stacy, there's a big project at this airport. I know your background in airports is very strong. Maybe there's something that you could look into." And that's what I try to surround myself with people like that. And I'm very passionate about it because I know, like all of us, eventually we have to step away from what we're doing and enjoy the beauty of life and let the next generation take over. So what can I do to change that and educate the next generation to step in and continue this process? That's what I'm passionate about.
Wow, just wow. Um, oh, I love this for so many different things. So I often say that I feel like my generation has kind of a it's something we just have to do. Like we have to put this stuff in place because I'm the last generation that kind of spans pre-internet and internet, and obviously everything that came after that is just different. And I just so we knew what it was like to travel without a smartphone, right? And to actually have to look at stuff beforehand and plan and do a bit of pre-planning and maybe buy a book on it sounds almost ridiculous, doesn't it? Maybe buy a book on the place that you were going to because that's what you were going to do, and you would talk to other people and you'd have conversations. And maybe the risks that were there then seem less than what they are now. Because I remember when I first did a trip to abroad, my mum was concerned about me going to Thailand not having clean water. Like it was Thailand in 2000. It was kind of it wasn't fine, but bottled water was readily available. Um, Now it just seems like the world has just changed so much, whereas we know how to kind of counter some of these risks because as I often say, it's not just that the world has changed and it's more risky. We as humans or these generations coming up underneath us are willing to take risks that I think perhaps we wouldn't have taken before.
Mhm.
Even just going back to you talking about people starting some sort of fracas or fracas at an airport just to get social media attention. I mean, like that just feels insane to my generation. Like, what the
Yeah.
why would you do that? But it's just a completely different mindset, and I just feel like we really owe it to them. So I'm echoing your point about this is what we've done. I've got all of this knowledge. I need to now impart this to actually try and make the world safer for these future generations that are then going to take it from you and move on. Because what I have a fear of if we don't do this, it's a bit like the sort of the digital generation. There's some stuff that's been lost somewhere along the lines of those people that
Mhm.
did stuff by bookkeeping, and then technology came in, and somehow that didn't connect because you see the technologies and they're not necessarily doing exactly the same thing as what. So we've complicated things. This stuff isn't necessarily that complicated. It's just about a different mindset. It's not about money. It is ultimately, but this is about
Mhm.
caring about the people that you're asking to do stuff for you.
Absolutely right. And
Mm,
you know what? Just to go back to something you said earlier, when you talked about traveling to Thailand when you were younger, pretty much what you and your mom were doing, you guys were actually doing a mini risk assessment.
right?
And prior to you traveling, I call it pre-trip planning. Prior to you traveling to an unknown location you've never been before, you're going to do your research on this location. Is there, a lot of civil unrest going on where I'm going? Okay, if there is, maybe I need to rethink where I'm going. What about the health conditions? We had COVID occur. Should I travel to the US? Should I travel to the UK? Things like that. You have to do these pre-trip planning assessments. So that's key prior to you doing anything. Unfortunately, a lot of people don't do their pre-trip planning. They just, look at, hey, I'm going on vacation or I have a business trip to this location. One of the things I try to do, especially if I'm leaving the country, that's paramount. Where am I staying? If I'm staying there, I'm going to do a Google map search of the hotel. Where are all the exits at this hotel in the event of emergency? Where's the closest embassy in the event that something happens? As we're seeing over in Israel, you have a lot of U.S. Uh, folks over there in Israel. How do we get them out? And I'm sure it's the same thing with you guys. You probably have a lot of folks over there in the UK, from the UK as well. What do we do to get them out of Israel? So these are things that we have to really, really keep in mind prior to taking a trip, pre-trip planning, because again, that's paramount. Do I drink the water, as you mentioned? Because we live in a place where I'm comfortable drinking my water here, but if I were to travel to another country, I can't do some of the things that I do in my homeland, and those are the things that I have to understand. And also, one of the things we very, very important that we have to do is just because you do and act a certain way in your country, which may be authorized, doesn't mean you can do those same things when you travel to another country. And we've seen that where folks travel to another country, they've done some things or someone says something to them, and you have this back and forth, and lo and behold, you're being arrested because you violated some type of policy over in that country. And those things I have to tell people, just because you do things a certain way in the US doesn't mean those same rules apply elsewhere. We have to remember that.
And at the moment, there's this blocker, right, where the client or the corporate who's asking someone to travel, because leisure travel is one thing, right? If you're traveling, yes, of course, you would hope that you would be doing it for yourself, just out of your own interest and your own kind of wanting to keep yourself and your family safe. But then there's this gap between corporate travel where I think for the last sort of 20, 30, 50 years, corporate organizations have sort of put it back on the traveler to do all of that, which is fine. And it was fine, again, this sort of pre-internet generation. But actually, it's kind of not so fine now because we're dealing with multi experienced workforces from globally, so obviously different cultures, different countries. You've got these huge organizations that have globalized and have this kind of company culture that's supposed to kind of sit across the whole culture. Don't be ridiculous, of course it doesn't, in the nicest possible way. It's completely subject to whatever country that company is operating in and the local cultures, etc. And so what are we expecting our what I'm trying to get to is what we're expecting our travelers to find out. What do we expect them to go and learn about before they go and do a trip? So there's this piece of responsibility which I completely agree that part of that is on the traveler and doing the stuff that we did naturally, which I don't think people all do to the same degree today, because actually they have this expectation. Well, what do you mean? Surely you've got this covered. Because if you're expecting me to go and do that, then the hotel's vetted, right? And this is done and this is done. Because, whoa. And it isn't. But these travelers I love. Like, these are the travelers that are changing the world for me. These are the travelers that are pushing back and saying, no, actually, unless this stuff's in place, I'm not doing it. But they only know what they know. And that's
Yeah.
why conversations like what we're having and the work that you do, I think, in educating travelers in the security side of things and the things they should look out for. And I mean, I do quite a lot of stuff when I check into a hotel, but I don't look at their plan and find out all their exit doors beforehand. So that's what I'm going to take
Yeah.
away. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
This is the stuff,
And,
right? Like,
and I,
why do you know?
yeah, and one thing I'll add to that, if you don't mind, insurance.
Yeah.
Huge, huge. When you talk about insurance, just because I have coverage here in the United States for my health insurance, I also have to understand, no, two things when I say insurance. Will I have insurance on my travel? So that's one. And two, if I'm in a country and I get ill, will my insurance cover my medical expenses or will the organization pick that up? So those are the things that you also have to do research on. But when an organization, when they care about their employees, and they have all the policies and procedures in place, your employees are willing to travel and do what they need to do for that organization because they care. So that what I mean by that is they've done the research. They know, okay, these are the things that we have in place in the event of a crisis, in the event of an illness or health issue. We have all these things laid out. This is what you do. One, two, three, four. You follow these steps. So again, I don't rely on anybody to tell me, the information, and I just take it as a grain of salt. I also have to do the research myself. So it's a two-way street. Don't just rely on someone telling you something. You also do the work yourself. And then you can possibly have that conversation. Once you find out new information, you can go to your employer or your organization and say, hey, quick question. These are the things that I did research on and I found this. is this true? Now you spark a conversation and you have that organization doing research as well. Lo and behold, they realize, you know what, maybe we shouldn't travel to this location because after further research, you are correct.
Yeah, 100% agreed, especially when we then start really bringing in the diversities of our workforce, right? That these aren't policies that might have been suitable for the executives of the organization 50 years ago. These are policies that have got to be acceptable for female travelers, for travelers of different cultures, of different races, of different sexuality, orientation, different ages, different, it's all got to work for everybody appropriately to what they need it for, right? Um, can you believe? Oh, well, we're not quite out of time. I'm going to squeeze in a bit more before I get to the top tips because I think you've been giving us tips kind of throughout all of this. So yeah, I just wanted to pick up on something, just the insurance piece. I had my first-hand experience of this year when I was in the US with my mum, and she collapsed, and we had to use her
Mm.
insurance. And in 24 hours, she racked up a $45,000
Oh,
bill.
wow.
Now,
Wow.
it was pretty serious. We don't have to deal with that in the UK. We've got the NHS, right? God help her.
Hmm.
Goodness help her for as long as we have her, but that's what we have. And that, just trying to deal with that from a lay, and I'm not a layman, I work in this, so I kind of knew what to do, but just trying to speak to the right people, trying to make sure it was all covered, all within that sort of 2 hour period of her practically, well, we almost lost her at one point, so it was really
Oh,
frightening.
wow.
um, was really intense, and I've never done that before, and I've worked in this all my life, and I thought, my goodness, I know the questions I should be asking. If you don't know, what do you do, and how do you ensure you're just talking to someone who could be anywhere in the world, quite frankly, because it's a global policy? How do you make them care that you're actually in this situation, and to ensure that everything goes to plan? Now, on the phone, everything was fine, but it then took another 6 months afterwards for us to finally get it all signed off because the insurance company couldn't quite get their head around the fact that we were in the UK.
Mm, okay.
Of course, we were on holiday. This is why it's all kicked in. But it was because, again, because it just operates, it's just completely different. They were still trying to bill our part, the hotel and where we were staying. It was really complicated. So just to FYI, everyone, definitely get into that and find out a bit more about it. And when it comes to the corporate, that's a whole other, massive piece. And I spent a lot of time during the beginning of the pandemic explaining
Mhm.
to corporates, when I was a TMC, what their travel insurance meant. It had nothing to do with cancellations. It had nothing to do with this. It was to do with medical. And yes, if you're
Mhm.
lucky, you might have this little extra bit that gives you some money back if you get cancelled. But that's not what that's about. That's down to the relationship with the travel provider. People just don't understand it. Is the key. But they're buying these policies, so let's try and
Yeah,
get our heads
yeah.
around it a bit. So on that, um, I want to just ask you now, like I say, you've given us lots of advice, you've given us lots of experience, but what are your top tips to, I guess, anyone wanting to just find out more about this or wanting to get into this space a bit more, or even, from a security perspective when you're traveling? Whatever you like. What's your golden nugget, Stacey?
Golden nugget for me, as a security consultant, I tell people all the time, if this is something that you're looking to do, it's very rewarding for me because you get to build this relationship with clients, you get to network with individuals such as yourself, and just build great relationships. So I look at that piece on the security consulting side. Be very passionate. It's not always about money. Of course, know your worth. Don't get me wrong, but it's not always about money. Just going out there, knowing and showing that you do care, and you want it to be safe for everybody, not just okay, I got this client, let me move on to the next client. As far as traveling, when your organizations have everything in place, again, as I mentioned, the employees they're happy to come to work, they're happy to work for you, travel. So make sure your policies and procedures are in place. And what I mean by that, don't just have policies and procedures in place. Read through them, study them. Again, a lot of policies and procedures, things had to be added to it after COVID once you open back up because in the event of a crisis like we saw with COVID, what do you do? And a lot of companies didn't add this into their policies or procedures. So these are the things that we have to add to. And there's nothing wrong with that. You may have robust policies and procedures, but there's nothing wrong with adding to them. So sit down and have this tough conversation. And if you have to get in a conference room, all heads together, just revamp your policies and make sure that they're, according to what you guys are doing as an organization. So those are a lot of the tips that I like to say. Again, I'm big into networking. Networking is key to me. So you may see me a lot on social media. Even if I tell people, don't just go in and like somebody's post, show them that you do care. That hey, I took the time to read this information, and guess what? I can add, maybe a nugget to something that someone posted. That's how we met. I read your post. I was intrigued by it, and without offending anybody, I would say, hey, I can also, lend this advice as well to what you were speaking of. And same with you, don't just, write a little blurb on LinkedIn, write a blog if you want to, and you can post that to spark conversation. So I'm really big into that. And I've gained a lot of friends and clients as well off of LinkedIn, and I continue to utilize it as my platform. So, network is key. Now that things are open back up, there's a lot of in-face networking events. Make sure you go to those. The biggest thing also is organizations. Do your research. Look at what organizations would best fit you. And that's what I did when I started my business. I needed to look at what organizations would be best for me because like anyone else starting a business, I had so many different organizations coming at me, wanted me to join this organization, and which is great. But my goal is to bring money into my company, not for me to pay all these different organizations that I belong to. So do your research, make sure it's a good fit for you. And, that way it gives you some credibility that, okay, not only is this person a security consultant, they belong to a robust organization. I know several other consultants within this organization, so that's great to see. And just get involved. Again, sometimes you may have to do some pro bono to start out just to get your name out there, and there's nothing wrong with that. So just make sure you're involved, stay relevant, continue to train, and continue to learn.
Love this. I'm just grinning as you're talking. I think there's such a renaissance, it feels like, for travel risk management right now. It feels, even though it's been around and we've been sort of aware of the risk, but certainly people like yourselves and other and huge and amazing consultants and people that I talk to in this space. But there is this other wave of, because this is going to get bigger, right? As you rightly said at the beginning of this, companies are not currently doing kind of exactly what they necessarily should be doing, and even those that are doing really well in this space are still going to have to keep evolving. There's a lot of companies in the world. If we bring SMEs into this, this is exactly what we need to be doing, because it's not just about the big globals, obviously, because we're concerning about all people. So that can be, a one-man band right up to, an SME or larger. We're going to need more people in this space, and I just love that approach. I think that's exactly what we do at 8 Phase as well. I'm One of the reasons we reached out to each other was, let's connect, let's see how we can help each other. And that's what I love about people working in this space. And I come from travel, and don't get me wrong, travel's open. We're really nice to each other, we really are. We're fun, we're social, but mm, I don't know that there's that much meat to the bones underneath it, if that makes sense. It's just all about selling. That's really what travel is about, in the nicest possible way. Whereas these people in this space, this is about caring. If you want to know what caring is, actually move into the security and the risk space, because that's what this is all about. And if we can kind of build that together, then that's great. So look, thank you so much for your time. Um, do you
You're
have any
welcome.
closing comments for us before I end the show today?
And I would be remiss if I didn't add this piece to a situation awareness. That's
Mm,
very important as well because when we travel, especially many of us in the U.S., certain things you have to consider. When I travel to certain countries, I may not wear a certain watch that I may enjoy wearing in the United States. So I don't want to stand out in other countries. Unfortunately, no pun intended, I will stand out because I'm super tall. But with that said, I won't have the jewelry. I see it all the time here in the States. I'm sure you see it over where you are. People in restaurants, especially when they're out in the foyer, or not in the foyer area, just outside dining. When I see people outside dining or just inside the restaurant, the first thing I see them do is place their phone on the table and they're talking and having fun with their coworkers or their friends. and someone can easily walk past or run past and snatch that phone and go. And you know what phones today, smartphones, you have all your information in those phones, from credit card information to whatever else you may add it to that phone. So situation awareness is key. I just want to thank you and say appreciate you having me on your show today. I look forward to seeing the final cut of this, and it was great. I enjoyed it, and don't hesitate to reach out if you ever need anything.
Oh, I won't be. There'll be no hesitating going on here. I was going to say he's very tall, but he's also very striking for those of you who are not watching on YouTube. So get on YouTube and have a look. That's where he's going to stand out in the crowd. So no, thank you, Stacey. That this has been such an important conversation. I'm so grateful for you commenting on my post, which is obviously which is what sparked our conversation. But I'm also so grateful for what you're doing and this attitude that you have of sharing and wanting to educate and wanting to kind of pass the baton on. I think that's just such an important thing. And, the fact that you return, after sort of 30, 35 years of federal government work, you're still working in this space. What does, that shows a lot of passion
Yeah,
that you're
yeah.
not ready quite to give this up yet. So look, it's been incredible. We'll definitely have you back for another talk. I've also got a way of trying to make you come over to the UK, which we'll talk about in a second when we're offline.
Awesome.
So
I would love that.
I thought you would. So thank you so much. Everybody, today you have been listening to Talking TRM. I am Travel Risk Bex, also known as Bex Deadman, if I do it the other way around. We will be back in a couple of weeks with another session. In the meantime, please stay safe, take care of yourselves, and keep listening. Bye bye.